Hey, when you are done your work, make a call to me. This is the intention of the callback functions. That means, for example, there is a function that performs some task. After completion of that particular task, you want to execute a specific function. Then you will use the callback function. For example, there is a function that calculates sum of n natural numbers. So after completion of that means after finding the result of that, you would like to execute a specific function. So you are supplying the callback function as argument to that function, so that particular function will execute some work, and after completion of the work, automatically the specified callback function will be executed. So whenever a function is being passed as argument to another function, and that callback function is being executed at the end of the another function, then that function is called as callback function. For example, there is a function that performs some task, such as doing some calculation or doing some work, and we are invoking that function here, and at the same time you are trying to supply a function as argument, and that function is called as callback function. Your intention is that after completion of the do work function execution, you want to execute that callback function automatically, but not now. See, if you want to execute the callback function immediately, you could have called that function right now itself, right? But your intention is that you want to execute that after completion of the do work function. So that is why you are supplying that callback function as argument to that do work function. So that do work function receives the callback function reference into a variable. This variable name can be anything, so that it performs some work, such as doing some calculation or something like that. So after completion of this specific task in the do work function, at the end, it makes a call to the my function reference that references the callback function. So from here, it goes to the callback function, executes all its body, and comes back to the same place, and there are no more statements here. So that is the end of the do work function execution. So overall, the point number 1 is you are supplying the reference of a callback function, and the second point is at the end of the do work function, you are executing that callback function by using this reference variable. Here, this variable my function ref acts as a reference to the callback function. So in the real world applications, at what kind of cases you are going to use this callback function? Let's say, for example, there is a function that performs some task. For example, you want to add the two numbers. And while invoking that do work function, you have two choices. Whether you can pass a function that prints the value in the console, or you can supply another function that prints the value in the web page. So, based on the requirement, you can supply either of these functions as argument, so that the same do work function can perform the addition of numbers and can call the corresponding function which is really supplied while invoking that do work function. So that in future, you can interchange the functions. You can either pass the function that prints the value in the console.log, or you can supply the callback function that prints the value in the web page. So you can decide what to do after completion of the specific task. In this kind of cases, you will use the callback function. And moreover, callback functions are best in the asynchronous operations such as set timeout, set interval, and promise. We will understand those later in this course. So let us try to implement the scenario of the callback function that I have explained before a moment. So let's create a file that is callback.js. And for example, there is a callback function that prints the name and age of the person. So this function receives the name and age of a person and prints those values in the console.log. So first it prints like name is, then it prints the value of name, and age is, it prints the value of age. I'm using the string interpolation that I have explained earlier. And this must be the backtick but not the single quotes. Alright. Now let me create another callback function, that is callback2, but it prints only the name. So we have two functions. The first callback function prints only the name and age, but second callback function prints only the name value. Now we have another function called doWork, which receives both name and age as arguments and doing some work here. For example, I would like to prefix the value of name with Mr. and I would like to increase the value of age. So assume we are doing some calculation here. So after completion of our work, I would like to call either callback1 or callback2. So for example, I am calling the callback1 now. And later, after completion of the doWork function, let me invoke that doWork function and supply the arguments for name and age. For example, Scott is the name and 20 is the age. So overall we have two callback functions, that is callback1 and 2, but we are invoking the callback1 only. We are not invoking the callback2 here. And of course, while invoking the callback1, we have to supply the values of name and age. So first of all, here the execution sequence begins. From here, we are calling that doWork function. And after completion of these two statements, we are making a call to the callback1. So from here, it goes to the callback1 function and prints the name and age, that is Scott as well as 21. Here you will get the output of 21 because we are increasing the value of age. So let's check the output. Let's run that file, that is callback.js. So we are getting that output from the callback1 because it prints both name and age. But now I don't want to execute the callback1, but I want to execute the callback2. So instead of calling the callback1, I am trying to call the callback2 here. And of course, we need not supply the age for that, because the callback2 receives only the name. So as you can see now, we are getting the output from the callback2. So we can decide whether we want to call the callback1 or callback2 from this statement. But assume a requirement such that I don't want to decide whether it is callback1 or callback2 in this place. This function should not specifically call either callback1 or 2, but the decision of either callback1 or 2 must be decided while invoking that doWork function. If that is the case, exactly you need the callback function. As of now, to be frank, this callback1 or callback2 are not the callback functions as of now. It's because we are not supplying the reference of callback1 or callback2 as argument. We are directly invoking that callback1 or 2 from this place, so those are not callback functions. In order to make it callback, we have to supply the same as argument here, and that must be received here, and that must be invoked here in this place. So the scenario is here. If you want to either specifically call either callback1 or callback2 within the doWork function, you don't require the callback function concept. But alternatively, you don't want to specifically decide either it is callback1 or callback2 within the doWork function definition, but you want to decide it later while invoking that doWork function. The advantage is here. Every time when you invoke the doWork function, either you can supply callback 1 or 2, so that the decision of callback 1 or 2 comes from the outside the doWork function. That is the advantage of callback functions. So let's print callback 1 here, callback 2 here. Okay, it will be easy to understand. Now, let's try to supply either callback 1 or 2. That means we are supplying the reference of callback 1 function as argument to that doWork function. So just like the parameters receive the values of string or numbers, there can be another parameter that can receive the reference of a function. And of course, these names like callback 1, callback 2, doWork, and myFunctionReference, all these are just user-defined names. You can give any names at your practice time. So for example, in this place, we can just give like X or something. Anyways, now let us invoke that myFunctionReference and supply name and age. Of course, even in case of callback 2 also, you are supplying the age, but that will not be received by the callback 2. So ignore that. Otherwise, we can also make it like we are receiving that age value, but first we are printing the age value here and then name. So the difference between callback 1 and 2 here, in case of callback 1, first we are printing the name and then age, but in case of callback 2, first we are printing the age and then name. So that is the difference we can understand. So as of now, we are supplying the reference of callback 1 to the myFunctionReference, and the same is being invoked here. So as of now, it calls the callback 1. Let's check it out. See, as of now, the callback 1 is executing, so that we got the name first and then age. So while the callback 1 only executes, it's because we are supplying only the callback 1 function as reference to the myFunctionReference. So that this myFunctionReference will be the alias name for the callback 1. In other words, both the variables callback 1 and myFunctionReference points to the same function as reference. In this case, you should remember that a variable stores reference of a function. So function is different and variable is different. You can understand this statement as let callback 1 equal to function. So this is your function actually, and this function reference is being stored in the callback 1 as well as myFunctionReference here. Alright, but in another scenario, let's say I am trying to supply the reference of callback 2. In this case, myFunctionReference contains the reference of this second function that is called callback 2. You can also declare the same in this way, that is, let callback 2 equal to function. Of course, you can follow either of the syntax. Either you can give like let variable equal to function or function variable name. It doesn't matter here. Anyways, so in this second case, since we are supplying the reference of callback 2, the same reference will be copied into this variable called myFunctionReference, so that it must call the callback 2 but not 1. Let's check it out. See, in this case, we are executing the callback 2 but not 1. It's because we are supplying the reference of callback 2 here but not 1. So what is the benefit of using all these callbacks? It's because we are not deciding either callback 1 or callback 2 must be executed inside the definition of the doWork. It only sticks to the name like myFunctionReference. It doesn't fix like either callback 1 or 2. But that decision can be made while invoking the doWork function. And here the biggest advantage is every time when you invoke the doWork function, you can make individual decision. For the first time, you are supplying the reference of callback 1. That means this statement invokes callback 1. But for the next time, when you invoke the same doWork function, you are supplying the reference of callback 2. So the same statement invokes the callback 2 then. So that is the advantage. You can make the decision of callback 1 or 2 while invoking that doWork function. So this is what the scenario when you can use the callback functions. Like you would like to decide whether you want to execute either first function or second function while invoking some function that performs some work. So here two conditions must be satisfied. That is, you must supply the reference of a callback function as argument, and that target function must receive the same. And the second rule is that the same must be invoked somewhere either in the middle or at the end of the function. So this is one best scenario where you can use the callback functions in the real-world applications. For example, let's say there is an application of HR management and there is a function that calculates employee salary at the end of the month. So after completion of salary calculation, either you want to include the tax in that or not, you can supply the same as argument while invoking that function. For example, in that case, there are two callback functions. One callback function includes the tax, second callback function doesn't include the tax. You can supply either of the callback functions as argument based on the requirement or based on the rules. That is the advantage provided by callback functions in that scenario. And of course, as I told already, you can use the callback functions especially in the asynchronous operations such as set timeout, set interval, as well as promise. We will understand promise in the further sections, but we are going to understand the set timeout and the set interval in the next immediate lectures itself. This is all you need to know about callback functions in JavaScript.